if you want to get into consulting, if you want to get into coaching, do what you're passionate about. If you're doing it for the money, it's not going to work out. It's not going to work out. Your clients are going to see through it. The clients will see that's what you're in it for. But if you're in it, the passion is going to show through.
Welcome, everybody. I'm excited today to have Dr. Justin Goldston talking with us about how you can navigate through the growth phase of a startup. Now, his expertise is well beyond this. He is an assistant professor of project and supply management at Penn State University, a 5-time TEDx speaker, an author, and an expert on diversity and inclusion. And when I spoke with him, what was so intriguing to me was how some of these strategies that are used in larger companies and in bigger situations that very often as entrepreneurs, we either disregard or we shy away from because they seem kind of complex, that he's very good at explaining these. So I figured he'd be a great person to help us understand some of the best strategies that are used at a macro level and apply them to our businesses. So welcome to the interview, Justin. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Wade, for having me.
Absolutely. So what I want to start out is something real simple. And again, from watching some of your TEDx talks and from talking with you, I know there's so many levels of depth you can go through, but I also know you're really good at explaining things in a simple way. How can small business owners apply large company strategies when starting a business, just in a generic sense? What are some of the best things they should be using as far as ideas, frameworks that maybe they're neglecting?
I would say, first, I'm going to say that when these organizations create their own, they brand their own frameworks, if you will, they come from a foundation, right? Whenever we see organizations discussing methodologies for like technology, for example, they're basic, and these organizations try to brand it to make it sound complex. Everything that we talk about today is not rocket science. And whenever you see these large organizations and these failed implementations, they try to get cute. And it all comes down to getting back to basics, keeping it simple. If you keep it simple, you'll be successful. If you keep it simple, you're going to have adoption from leadership. You're going to have adoption from your employees. So I would say keep it simple and look for those foundational methodologies, those foundational frameworks for these things, such as Agile, such as digital transformations and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you. And I definitely love in different business books when people will sometimes start with the lemonade stand model to say, look, let's keep this real simple. There's, some basic supplies and people, okay, there's the lemons, there's the water, there's the sugar, and there's the business, and there's some basic things. And I agree with you, definitely. Part of positioning, and it's not horrible, it's marketing. You want to say that, hey, our stuff's pretty cool. But as you said, there's a part where it gets cute or it loses its fundamentals. And if you look at some of the most successful, whether it be inventions or businesses, I mean, look at Amazon. Amazon just delivers. And that's not even a saying of theirs. I don't think it's part of their marketing, but it's something you're going to get it and it's going to be delivered. And there's a lot that goes behind that as far as the implementation of. There's a lot of technical stuff, but the mission and what they're about is very simple. And I could understand definitely how if you're growing a business, that then keeping people reminded, look, this is our main thing. We deliver well and we deliver what we said we're going to do. And so if that's the recurrent theme, then when I have 50, 100, 5,000 people beneath me or organizationally or whatnot, I don't have to worry if they're going to mess it up as long as I stay consistent to that message. I know some of the best leaders I've had when I've been in the corporate world have been 1 to at most 3 objectives that we're working on. And usually it's just 1 to do things. Awesome. Which strategies would you say that people sometimes get excited by, do apply to large companies, but either not to small businesses or not yet? So for example, I'll give you an example of one, and you might have, I'm assuming, better examples, but I've heard some people say that sometimes when a person starts a small business, they start it with all these worries about, well, what if we have 10,000 people? I've got to prepare to scale. And it's like, no. First, you've got to make it through the first year. And it's great that you see that. And that's great. But there are differences. So there are certain things that, no, you don't want to use those yet. Those are truly advanced strategies that, again, fundamentally speaking, you need to grow into. versus saying, I'm going to start with these more advanced strategies? What would you say are the basics that people need to focus on? And what are some of the things that maybe they need to hold off on before until they at least grown or received or attained a certain amount of stability in their business?
I Before getting a higher education, I was a management consultant, and I was working with a lot of small, medium, and large and startups in digital transformations, implementing enterprise applications, if you will, right? And in some environments, it's exactly like you said. They have this strategic plan where they want to grow, and they want to purchase this $500,000 application and think it's a silver bullet. They believe that technology is going to save the world. And again, you have to get back to basics, and you have to take baby steps. And I also say that you have to get your house in order. When you're talking about technology, that's one of the things that I said. Get your house in order first. Ensure that your data is accurate. Ensure that your data is clean. Okay. Make sure that all your customer ship tos are accurate and your customer records are accurate. I laugh, but that is probably the most common thing that I see within organizations. It's the basics of data. And although I talk about technology, again, and you're gonna hear me say get back to basics all day long on this call, because that's what it comes down to, especially for startups. They get this shiny shiny item syndrome, and they hear the blockchain and the artificial intelligence and things like that. And yes, yeah, I will say that blockchain is applicable to small and medium organizations. Artificial intelligence is applicable to small and medium organizations, but you can't go from Excel to artificial intelligence. It's a phased approach. It's baby steps to get there. So I would say that it's a progression from a technological perspective, but yes, technology can be a differentiator. Yes, technology can be a competitive advantage, but it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. And most importantly, technology is just a tool. That's all it is. It assists you in making those decisions. It does not make the decisions for you. Technology cannot sense body language. Technology can't sense empathy. Technology doesn't have the soft skills that make a business successful.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other things, and I think about something, and I'm pretty sure this is a quote from Bill Gates talking about technology being a multiplier. But if
Mhm.
you've got unprofitable business, all it's going to do is multiply your unprofitable business. So when people say,
Yes.
"Oh, I'm into real estate," it's okay, and I'm buying real estate. How's it going? Well, it's not going well, so I'm going to double down and buy some more. Like, okay, let's look at why it's not doing well. Maybe you don't know the fundamentals, and maybe you shouldn't be buying more. And again, it's just going to multiply what you're doing. I think of something as simple as people are building an email list. It's a very basic small business strategy.
Mhm.
Building your business, your database. Well, if your emails are wrong, if the data is wrong, just imagine if you had an email software that for some reason transcribed the emails wrong. So you got an email that was accurate. By the time it hits your database, it's wrong, and every one of your emails is wrong. Well,
Mhm.
now every marketing strategy you've done, everything that built up to that would basically have been a waste. Not completely. I
Mhm.
guess technically you'd build a relationship and whatnot, but that's a pretty big deal. And so again, to your point, I think a lot of people complicate things because definitely the idea that technology is going to do something big or it's going to scale something. I've made this mistake before. Hell, if this new software, this new look on my website is going to make a difference. And yes, sometimes branding does look different. And if your website looks like it's from 1980 and you move it to 2020, sure, that'll probably help you. But overall, I think a lot of people get lost in this. And I imagine you've had this happen. I've had more times than I'd like to admit where clients have paid a pretty good amount of money and I didn't filter them or educate them well enough to say, whoa, hold on. There's no magic in you giving me this money or you pinging your credit card. There's going to be work that needs to happen on
Yeah.
your side. I'm giving you foundations or fundamentals, but you're going to need to be doing the work because if I could just do it by myself, I wouldn't just go to you. I'd just do it myself. no offense. I just go, if I could like double my money, I just go double my money. I wouldn't go hire clients. I'd just go do it. And one of the things I think people get caught up in is, again, like you said, overestimating what the technology can do. And
Hmm.
it sounds magical and it sounds wonderful, uh, but it usually skips the work. And somewhere, doesn't have to be struggle, but somewhere there's hustle involved. Somewhere there's work.
Yes.
Somewhere there's patience. Somewhere, all those things that require something to happen. So I want to go into something a little more specific. You've talked about Agile. And when you and I talked in the pre-interview, I said, okay, I've heard of Agile. I don't really know exactly what it is. I know what the word means in the sort of generic Webster's dictionary sense of it, but I've heard of it enough to be intrigued by it, but not to understand it. If you don't mind starting out first, just to for a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a small business owner, what is Agile? What does it have to do with business? And then how might it apply to helping, or how to use it when you work with consultant or when you consult with clients? What does that look like, and why are people saying this word agile? Agile, it's agile. Okay, what's that mean?
Okay. So let me back up with the basics, right? So in traditional, whenever you're planning projects, when you're planning initiatives, uh, conventionally we would have what we refer to as a waterfall approach in project management, where you have that step by step by step by step by step, that structured approach, right? You have guardrails, pretty much. You have guardrails. Within Agile, you have an iterative approach where you can implement, you plan, you implement something, you get feedback, and you pivot, right? And you just keep doing that, keep doing that, keep doing that, keep doing that until it's live. Now, I always love sharing this story. I was speaking with the individual in Singapore, and she says, "Oh yes, I listened to one of your lectures you sent." He's like, "Agile, this agile, isn't that a little reckless?" I said it sounds reckless. I said, but it reduces risk, because think about it. If I'm a business and I've planned all of this stuff for a year and a half without feedback, and I've built this stuff up, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't have feedback. I don't know if the employees are going to like it. I don't know if the clients are going to like it. I flipped the switch. It's a train wreck. Now I'm shut down. With an agile approach, I can do what we refer to as sprints. I can do 6-week sprints. I figure I have all these requirements, and I work with my team and say, okay, how many of these things can we get done in 6 weeks hypothetically? Okay, we can knock out these 5 things. All right, let's knock these 5 things out. Once that time fence is over, cut it off. Now we implement it. Now we get feedback from employees. Now we get feedback from first time adopters. Okay, you like this? You like this? You like this feature in our application? Okay, we keep it. This one's trash. All right, let's make modifications, and you just keep doing that. But so now, a year and a half down the line, I know this thing is going to be pretty solid. Yes, there's going to be some tweaks that has to happen. Yes, I've pivoted throughout the entire process, but I'm confident that this solution is going to be successful. So that's why I love the agile approach, because you get that continuous feedback loop, right? I don't have to wait for a year and a half and cross my fingers once I flip the switch after a year and a half to see if this thing works or not. And I think that's very, 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 very important for startups. One because you're at the size where you can do that. You can pivot quickly, right? And two, I don't think that you can take on the risk of waiting a year and a half to flip the switch to see if this thing works or not. So that's why I'm a huge advocate of agile for startups and small and medium businesses.
Awesome, thank you. And that reminds me of examples I've heard, and it's interesting. It's almost like similar language in slightly different way it's worded. So I've heard a few different different experts in the entrepreneurial field and the online business field talk about, okay, before you even start building your product, for example, create your offer, start your sales page, do your branding. Let's even see if
Mhm.
anybody buys. And that doesn't work in all product situations. But for example, if you're about to create, I don't know, a 1-year mastermind of a coaching program, yes, you want to have your 12 steps of, let's say, each month we're going to focus on this and whatnot. But there's certain things that at a certain level of quality take a while to build out. There's, if you're doing something like a mastermind where you're getting feedback from people, by its nature, you might have, I mean, you want to have an idea where you're going. So this is to the young lady from Singapore's concern. This is not about saying, oh, I have no idea what I'm going to do and I hope something happens. It's saying, yes, I have an idea, but I'm also clear that it's not going to work out exactly
Mhm.
that way. And in fact, I just think of marriage. Marriage is a constant feedback loop. You might have this idea of what it's going to look like. We're going to do this. We're going to move here. We're going to have this many kids. We're going to do this. They're going to join the basketball team. They're going to, all these
Right.
different ideas. And then life happens, and it's not a bad thing. It's just something that shifts. And I find a lot of people, when they get too specific on something, it's almost they're having a hard time. And it's that whole saying, it is what it is. Well, it's not what you think it is. It's not what you hope it is. It's not what the book you read said it is. It's what is. And if you're getting the feedback, I like that discipline really of constantly looking for feedback, because if you're not doing that, I think of times when I did a software business, my software business, the first time I launched, and I rolled out this product, and this is back in 2003. So it's an Excel-based software. The computing, or at least I wasn't at the point to be able to update it online. So I'm doing a once-a-year update, and I've got to get it right, but I've got to launch something really simple, and I've got to have that one thing that I launched, because this is old days. I'm sending it by CD in the mail,
Those
snail
days,
mail.
huh?
So, and I'm burning them on my computer. I've got to get this right. I don't want, to your point, I don't want 50 extra features that are going to bug out. I want the core, piece that they need. I need to get that right. And then I can make updates maybe every 90 days or maybe, but to be simple to say, okay, this is the one core thing I'm doing. And then I can get feedback. Well, I didn't get feedback on whether or not they had updated. I just sent an email, said, hey, if you need any help, let me know. And nobody said they needed help. Well, a year later, I'm like, okay, who's renewing? And 50% of them didn't. Like, what happened? Oh, wait, we never implemented it. We bought it, and you sent us the CDs, so we felt bad asking for our money back. But there was no, I did not have that feedback loop. And to me, based on what I knew, I had done my due diligence. I'd said, hey, call me if you need help. I'm open to help. I'm ready to
Yeah.
help. But there wasn't an active, I was putting it on them to run my business. Whereas my responsibility is the way I'd word it now to say, oh, let me follow up and let me check and see how it's going, and to make sure that there's actually buy-in here and what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah. And I think with everything that we're talking about, it comes down to two-way communication and two-way knowledge sharing, right? And I think that your example just demonstrated that. I mean, in your case, you're a consultant. I mean, you've been consulting, startups and entrepreneurs for years. As a management consultant, I've been consulting for years, and we get lost, and we miss the listening part, right? We have to listen to the clients. We have to listen because we learn from them as well. And that's one thing that I talk about with my students, in that I got paid to learn in consulting, because with every single project I learned something new, because it's different environments, it's different decision makers, it's different personalities, most importantly different personalities. This software, I could have had the greatest software in the world, but if the people don't adopt it, it's gonna fail, right? So that's one important thing for entrepreneurs. I would say to listen to your employees, listen to the voice of the customer is the most important thing for entrepreneurs. And you need to put your pride aside and listen to the voice of the customer. And the most important thing is, in most cases, it's free. with all of the outlets now on social media, you can get the voice of the customer, and people are willing to share share their opinion, especially if you're going to give them something for free and say, "Hey, try this. Let me know how it is." Right? They are very willing and open to give feedback. And in some cases, in a lot of cases, I incentivize to get that feedback. $25 gift card, $50 gift card is nothing for feedback. That's nothing. I think I was listening to one podcast, and this artificial intelligence professor or expert, he said data is gold. I said, man, that's brilliant, because it is. Look at Amazon. Like I said in our pre-call, Amazon used to sell books. And I said this on multiple podcasts. Amazon used to sell books. Amazon just saved the world back in March and April. And Amazon's success is based on data. Look at Netflix. Netflix shut down Blockbuster, literally,
Oh
with
yeah.
data. It comes down to data.
Well, and the thing that's interesting for me is when you talk with people, again, it's great. And I'm an author. You're an author. It's great to write books. We want to inspire people. And one of the toughest things is any author knows if you've written any sort of instruction or self-help or business or any sort of book like that, is you usually have, let's say, 5 to 7 things you want to say.
Mhm,
Very often the audience will remember 1 or 2.
mhm.
And so you hope they remember the right 1 or 2. Hopefully you point those out, but then some of the other pieces are relevant. And so I see so many people that are starting businesses and their assumptions are based on something that is very often just incomplete, not wrong, not evil. Sometimes you'll have people that are sharing information where they don't understand why they did so well. So, for example, Shaquille O'Neal could post or create a book on how to dunk a basketball. Chapter 1, be 7 foot. Chapter 2, take ball, throw it. And he might say, yeah, this is great. You say, well, hold on, buddy. Your target audience is 7-footers. It's not the rest of us that might actually have
Right?
to jump a little. There might be more steps involved. So it wouldn't mean he's a bad dude for doing that. But sometimes people will have a success and they don't realize all the steps. They might be, well, oh yes, I was, my parents stayed together. I was raised in a family. I had a college education. I had all the support all the way through. And then I wrote this book and everything worked out. I said, whoa, hold on. There's other steps that maybe other people don't have, I happen to get a master's in business administration from, a top school. Okay, well, that's a variable. That's a piece of information that you have that other people don't. And I think of the way I started my consulting business, and it wasn't intended to be, but it had to get agile really quickly because I started with idea A, which had to do with charitable giving and estate planning and technology. And I started at January 1st, 2020. Stock market crashed like not crashed, but the tech market, a lot of it really went south about 3-4 months in. And all this training and all these ideas and all my sequential plans didn't pan out. And it got back to, okay, small business owners who I've worked with, what's going on? Just complete 360 model feedback. What's working? What's not working? What can I help you with? What are the biggest things, your biggest frustrations? What are they costing you? How can I help you with those? Here's what I'll charge for and initially it was, here's what I'll charge for my time, because I haven't proven I can get results yet. And then eventually, round 2 or iteration 2.0 was, okay, I've gotten these results now with this group. Next group, here's my slightly increased investment, and here's what I believe we can have. Here's why it'll take less time. But I couldn't have written it any other way. It would have either been just false. And I know there's a lot of people say, fake it till you make it. And I get the intention behind it of saying, be confident and step up to the plate. But there's a fine line between that and just absolutely misrepresenting what you can do,
Right.
or putting yourself in a position where you perhaps can't do that. What would you say when you work with the larger corporations? What are the most common areas where they're not agile that hurts them? And then what would you say the same of small business owners? What are the most common areas where they're not very agile? They're very fixed. And let's go into this if you don't mind. Like, is it the ego? Is it like a little more of the personal side? Because usually, in my experience, there's a lot of Greek tragedy, Shakespeare in there of here's the one guy or the one gal that's so sure they're right, and everybody's like, no. what's that usually look like so that when a person's self-assessing, say, ooh, maybe I'm doing this, maybe I'm not listening to what's trying to scream at me. What are the warning signs when, again, things aren't working in either a large business or small business, and how can people be more aware of that?
I would say, based on the number of environments, the bureaucracy in large organizations is common. To your point, those egos in large, like Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 5, that's huge. The Wharton grads, they don't want to be viewed as them taking the opinion of Justin from Penn State. And perfect example. So my company was hired by this startup company in Pennsylvania, two Wharton grads, right? And they were having issues with their field service repair area. And whenever I went out there with one of my peers, they were just blurbing out supply chain content from textbooks. I know exactly what textbook it came from. And we went out to dinner one night. We were having drinks, and Liquid Courage came out. And and I said, look, I said, the CEO hired us to come out here to help you. I said, if you're not going to help, if you're not going to listen to our suggestions, I can sit at home and take my hourly rate. I get paid the same no matter what, right? I said, I have the industry experience. You have the book smarts. I have the street smarts. I have the empirical experience, right? So we have to work together for a common goal. And I mean that example was a startup. That example was a small company where they took that corporate mindset and brought it down to the you know like they had like 12 employees or something like that. So a very successful company. But I think that you have to put the egos aside, and you have to. So you have these leadership theories. You have transformational leadership. You have transactional leadership. You have servant leadership. Now, in some cases, a transactional leader, that's required in like an Amazon environment, a distribution environment, where if you don't get this product out the door, you're closing your doors, right? You need a transactional leader. Transformation and transactional leader is not going to work in a small and medium enterprise. You need that servant leadership, right? Now, one thing I always explain to people is the I would say the most successful leader is whether you're a transactional leader or you're a transformational leader. If you blend servant leadership into either one of those, that's where you're going to get buy-in. That's where you're going to get people. That's where you're going to get people to follow you. That's where you're going to influence your people within your organization. Again, you could have the greatest pitch. You could have the greatest product. You could have the greatest technology. Without the people, you're done.
Absolutely. I think of some of the mistakes I made, and as a small business owner, we sometimes have this idea that we've got to, or even large business owner, that we have to know everything, that we
Mhm.
have to be the hero, and a lot of people say, oh, that person's so arrogant or dogmatic. And sometimes, as most people know, if you've studied psychology, if somebody projects arrogance, usually there's a lot of insecurity
Absolute
behind it.
100%. I agree with you on that one.
And so sometimes I'd make these decisions, and almost like a parent that's trying to say, whoa, whoa, hold on, everybody, kids, I got this. I don't want you to worry. And and yet at the same time, sometimes the information I needed to be able to say, hey, what are y'all seeing? Because I'm kind of confused. And again, coming from a very noble intention that I don't want y'all to be scared. I don't want y'all to worry about your jobs. But I can't protect that, and I can't prevent that. The market's going to decide that and how we interact with the market. And so some of my biggest, financial mistakes, and then mistakes where I later had to say to somebody, gosh, you know what? I wish I'd have listened earlier. Now I'm having to let you go, which is, if you're a small business owner, if you really want to experience if you've never experienced letting go somebody when you don't want to me, you've not fully experienced the full range of being a small business owner, because there's something very humbling about looking somebody in the eye that's done a good job for you, that as best as you train them, did with their best intention what they thought they were supposed to do. And you have to say, oh, yeah, but you know what? It's not working out. And usually it's because, again, as a small business owner, didn't see something, wasn't able to identify something. And sometimes businesses, take their course. But certainly so much of that was not meant to be arrogant, but it was just this sense of, wait, I'm supposed to know. All this pressure, again, like trying to be the perfect parent without ever consulting another parent or a book or anything else, and just thinking or the perfect husband or the perfect anything, and spontaneously knowing everything. I definitely think that concept, and I'm what I'm hearing from Agile is even just being open to feedback and being willing to shift and
Yeah.
change, and being humble enough to realize that there are larger forces than you as an individual, being brave enough to say, yes, I'm going to do X. And I think there's a concept some people talk about of intentions versus goals, that goals, especially if you get too much your ego behind them, can become sort of this hell or high water. Failure is not an option. Failure is always an option. You might not want it. Failure is always on the table.
It's only feedback.
Yeah. Versus an intention saying, here's my intention. I want to, for example, make the world a better place. I think it's going to look like this nonprofit that does such and such. But then all of a sudden you say, oh, these regulations. Oh, but wait, I could do something over here, as opposed to, no, if it's not going my way, I'm going to dig my heels in. I'm going to fight. And I think, again, you mentioned servant leadership. So much of that is a humble approach that can be balanced with still, yes, butt kicking, transactions are accurate, or the vision is awesome, so it's transformational in what we're doing. What do you find when you talk to people? There's this concept you hear people that talk about, and they'll say, I'm a serial entrepreneur. And I'm going to go with a stereotype here. This is the person, you're already smiling. This is the person that's sometimes done 10 businesses and every one of them's failed. And I'm not trying to knock the person. So if you're listening, I'm not trying to, but it's the person that maybe doesn't follow through on things. So they kind of jump from one thing to another. What's the difference between that and pivoting? Because I think this kind of speaks to the concern of the woman from Singapore of, okay, are we just flaky and we just do whatever we want when we feel like it, versus yes. So how do you know you're being agile, so to speak? Versus how do you know when you just kind of have no idea what the hell you're doing and you're trying to wing it, and maybe you need to take a step back and be a little more, and we're assuming if there's crystal balls involved, I'm assuming somewhere you're being a little too, you're not being agile. You might be, no offense to people like crystal balls, but if that's all you got, if you don't have a strategy, maybe it's something like that. But how do you balance those two to know that you're not just way off target, but you can pivot versus, oh no, you didn't have a plan in the first place. You need to kind of go back to square one, or kind of pull back a bit.
Yeah. So within the planning stage within Agile, one of the first things we were in, and let me back up and talk about, one of the most important things with Agile is that you don't really have a project manager. You really don't have a project leader, right? You have shared accountability among your team members. And that's another important reason why I love Agile, right? So with Agile, you have different approaches, like Scrum being one of them. And Scrum could be like it could be, if you needed to compare them, the Scrum Master is synonymous with the project manager, but the Scrum Master does not manage. The Scrum Master does nothing but educates the project team on Agile, right? And they only are that servant leader to ensure that the project team has everything they need to be successful. Okay. Now to answer your question, also early within the planning process, you have to say what's the definition of done, right? So that's going to be the difference for the serial entrepreneur versus pivoting, right? So I have the definition of done. I have what I want this end goal to be, and I can pivot all I want to until I get to that definition, right? So for that serial entrepreneur that kind of leaves everything, did I hit done? Did I hit done? Did I hit done? Nope. Okay, got a problem. So to answer your question, I think that the difference is understanding a definition of done. I think whenever you are starting up a business, whenever you are doing a project within that business, I think that that's one of the first steps you have to do. What is a definition of done? What does done look like? What does a successful project look like? What does a successful startup look like once I proverbially flip that switch? Right?
Awesome. And one of the things that I've tried to do, and I'm going to ask you to translate this or share your wisdom on this. When people or friends have asked me about, well, hey, Wade, what about this idea? What do you think for the business? First of all, I get very nervous to give people specific business advice about any particular industry because it's like, dude, you got to do your research and do your own stuff because it's like, real estate investing, stock investing, everybody's got to do their own thing
Mhm.
as opposed to, yes, here's the stock and you bet on this and it's going to work no matter what. So when I'm looking at a project and if it worked or didn't work, if it completely tanks, then I've got to look and say, okay, again, this might be a hobby. This might be something that really wasn't to make a lot of money, or it's just not going to. I still want to do it. So it's a hobby. And that's great. For me, that goes on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That goes into my personal life, whatever you want to call that. And that's okay. That doesn't have to mean I failed, especially if it's something that's your soul work that you believe you're called to do. I know a lot of people get caught up in, well, Wade, my soul work has to make me money. Say, look, part of why I believe I'm on the planet is to raise children. I don't make money from that. And I'm very committed to that. But I can do that separately. And then there's another definition of done for me. Is I completed it. And then I say, okay, can I stay in the game? And obviously we have ideas of what we'd like it to be like. My question for you is, how do you know, or where does a person look at, okay, it's done. I completed, in order from what I can control, I completed my project. I delivered X. So I've met my definition of done. How do I know when, if I get a substandard result? Obviously, if I get a great result, great, let's keep rolling. When the result starts getting questionable, where do you draw the line between what can be pivoted to something else versus, like, in other words, what's unpivotable? What's like, nope, you're just done. Is that just your financial constraints? Is that more the definition of the person and their financial ability or their willingness? How do you advise them where you say, nope, yeah, you can't pivot from that?
I would say that it's the age old answer. It depends. It depends on the person's appetite, right? Person's risk appetite, the person's budget. It depends on where the person is within the project itself. It depends on, are they going to have that return on investment if it's going to require a large amount of investment to pivot, if you will. So there's a number of different variables that go into that. Now, again, I would say that, and this goes to, so this next statement goes for anything, and that we talked about today, where that's where, you know you have to reach out. You have to reach out for those who've went through it. You have to reach out to your fellow entrepreneurs. Put the pride aside. Put the pride aside. People's been through this. You haven't been you're not the only person to experience this particular situation. There's probably a large number of people that are experiencing it right at this given point in time, exactly how you're experiencing it, right? So kind of create a band of entrepreneurs to collaborate and get through it together. I say this often, where there's enough money to go around, and even if you are competitors, you can kind of come to a common agreement and work it out, because if you both fail, what good is it? And competing and not collaborating. So, and that's one interesting thing that I've just experienced in the last 3 or 4 weeks, where I'm working with a number of startups within the logistics industry, the supply chain and logistics industry, and they're competitors, but they work together, they collaborate, and I guess they say that there's 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 enough to go around. I mean, you see how big this industry is. There's enough to go around, and I see that a lot within the ERP software industry, where those big companies, they trade well, the big companies and the partners, if you will. Let me go back. The big companies and the partners, if you will. So during a sales cycle, The oracles will compete with their partners on the same product, right? But then at the end of the day, they'll say, this customer's too risky. You can have them. You give me the next one. It's trade. They're trading. It's horse trading. So you don't have to be always be in competition. You don't have to always be in competition. And I talk a lot about sustainability, and in order to have this future sustainable world that your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids to live in, we have to work together. We have to get away from this mindset, this cutthroat mindset. That's probably one of the reasons why I left the industry. And I went into education to teach leaders, future leaders, in undergraduate and graduate programs, that we have to go to a servant leadership. We have to be empathetic. We have to put our employees first, because all these great things that you're starting your company on, this great software solution you're starting your company on, if you don't take care of your employees, your customer service reps, your programmers, this thing ain't gonna get rolled out because you can't program it.
Yeah,
You have
and
a
this
brilliant
is the
idea, but you can't program it.
absolutely, and this is the part that for me becomes, and I didn't know that part, the idea that there's not really a project, like an overarching hierarchical project lead in an agile framework, as opposed to more of somebody that's facilitating. And in so many ways, people that see this have a hard time with either sharing or saying, well, what's going to happen? Well, we're going to have the wisdom of a group of people, and it's going to require the humility to even say, I might have more education than certain person. I might have a higher IQ than a certain person, but that's just one measure. That's my intellectual quotient. That's not my emotional quotient. That's not my spiritual, my physical ability, my endurance, my psychological. There's so many different pieces. And usually somebody else in there has some other, whether you want to call it unique skill, unique ability, superpower, that if you're having those work together, that it can work better. One of the things that I definitely want us to get into in a short order today is, let's go through this if you don't mind. A typical software as a service business, let's say, is looking to start a business. And first of all, if a person's in that business, we're looking, read Getting Real by 37 Signals. They're now called Basecamp. They call their business. Great book on delivering something and starting a piece at a time. But if somebody's starting that sort of a business, so the software as a service, whether it's a web-based software, usually it is these days, subscription type service. So a person's building a business. I know you know what that is. I'm just saying for the sake of the audience. Again, there's this perfectionistic view sometimes that says, okay, we're going to deliver all of this. We're going to deliver all 10 features, let's say. So let's say there's 10 features. And we know that by 2 years, we need to be delivering, let's say, 10 features or something like that. How would you suggest that person, again, they're designing their startup. This person's now sitting at their kitchen table and they're thinking, okay, here's how I'm going to start this. And so I'm going to need to take some risk. I'm going to need to take some money. I'm not the programmer. I may need to hire some talent. But again, I need to be able to stay in the game, because if I can't stay in the game, all the theories aren't going to help us. What's a responsible way or an intelligent way from a big picture for that person to kind of map out perhaps what their first 1 or 2 or 3 years might look like, even with some simple definition as of these 10 features. These 10 features, I believe I have to have them at some point, but let's say 5 of them are just absolute critical. I can't launch without these 5. What would you tell that person? What could their journey look like that, again, combines a responsible game plan, but an ability to be agile and to take feedback? And what might that look like in a very practical sense from a scheduling standpoint?
I would say you said to pick the 5 that you said that are solid, but I would say to list out those 10. Keep the 5 in your mind, and share those 10 with the people you can trust. I will say the people you can trust, most important, the people you can trust. And say, pick out your 5, pick out your 5, pick out your 5, and those 5, tell me why. Right. And now you can get to a consensus as to the true 5 you should really tackle. I work with a number of startups in the blockchain space, in the artificial intelligence. I just had one guest lecture in my class yesterday. and they said that, oh yeah, we were going to be gung ho with the blockchain in the maritime industry, but then we pivoted to artificial intelligence within the space. So that's too drastic. I mean, yes, some on the surface you would say that's technology. Yes, no, it's two different, two big different things. So, but I would say to pick out your top 10, share them with your peers you can trust, have them pick out their five, and then gain a consensus.
So yeah, you just nailed it. Because it's funny. The first thing says like, wait, you mean my five could be wrong? Like, and that's something. And again, as somebody who's thinking, well, yeah, no, but I know, and that's one of the other toughest things. I've always told people that the key to a successful marriage is knowing when to listen to your spouse and when not to. Now, I haven't figured out when to listen to my spouse and when not to, but I know that's the key to a successful marriage.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
Right. Well, it's the same thing. As entrepreneurs, we sometimes have this confidence. And, I think about in athletics, it's specifically basketball, people say, well, so-and-so's got a lot of confidence. And if somebody's a great shooter and they don't let missed shots distract them, you'd say, well, that person's, they're ice cold, they got ice in their veins, they'll take that last minute shot. But if the person's not very good, you say basically his confidence is unjustified. So sometimes as entrepreneurs, we've got to decide, okay, what point are we going into the area of unjustified confidence? And even more so to your point, what's it hurt to ask 5 to 7 to 10 other people that you really trust to get a sense of, oh, well, yeah, these are their five. And again, to your point, there might even be 3 others that say, oh, no, these are the 3 others, leave a couple other, what are your top 5 and write them in if you need to or whatnot. And certainly you want to be clear of, is that your target audience? I mean, it's not, 5 to 10 random people might be okay in your target audience that you're looking for. But again, to your point, asking the questions just costs you your time. Asking that question a year in, it's kind of late. You've put now,
Right.
how much, at least a year's worth of your life and God knows how much as far as time and money into it. And I think that's the
Yeah.
part that, again, feels very uncertain for people. But something you said earlier when you were mentioning the lady from Singapore was, how she didn't like that there wasn't this linear plan. And if you've been in the business world any amount of time, we used to say this 20 years ago, and it was kind of news because the business world had been kind of steadying since then. And then the last 20 years, people change jobs all the time. Say, look, just because you think it's going to be a certain way, that has no impact on reality whatsoever. So you going like this, going la, 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 it's not, I don't need to be agile, isn't going to change the fact that stuff's going to happen. And you need to be willing to pivot to whatever word you want to call that. And I think that's something that people miss. What would you say would be perhaps any different for somebody in, let's say, consulting or coach practice? You're an expert. You've done your TED Talks. You're a professor, so you've done work. You didn't just say, okay, well, I've got this book this little ebook. What would you say is fundamentally true? And I'm going to throw in one part to it. Sorry for the really long questions. I just realized I ask questions this way because you said something earlier about you get paid to learn. And I know so many people when they're starting a business say, well, I'm not trading my hours for dollars. I'm not doing that. And I said, well, Lionel Messi, LeBron James, they trade their hours for dollars. They're employees. They're doing okay. They're not abused. They're going to be fine. Don't worry about them. And a lot of people get so caught up in, well, no, but see, I'm going to start in my own little world over here and nobody employs me. Nobody can tell me what to do. And it's like, yeah, but also nobody's paying you. So you've got to very quickly come up with something that's going to sell yesterday, as opposed to having, whether you want to call it a job, a side hustle or whatever, or something that's steady where you are, as you said, being paid to learn. You're willing to acknowledge, I don't know everything. How would you say, or what does that look like in your journey as being someone who's now a successful consultant and or coach, professor, being able to, in essence, share your wisdom and get paid for it? But you've done a lot of the work. What would that look like if somebody says, yeah, I've heard about this coaching industry and I want to be a coach and I'm looking for a responsible way to do it. I don't need to, I'm not running from my job. That's always a good sign, by the way, if you're listening. If you're running from your job to something, that's not always a great reason. Well, to start a relationship or to start a business for that
You're right
matter.
about that
Both
one.
can be very costly. But how would you advise somebody that says, you know what, okay, I normally do things well. I don't have to run for my job, but I do eventually want to in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. I want to be in a position like you are, Justin, where I'm an expert. Maybe I'm not a professor. Maybe that takes a little longer, But what does that look like to be a successful consultant and start that out again in a way that's agile, that's smart, that's just profitable and sustainable without having to work 80 hours a week?
So I would start out well in my journey, my mindset was to be the best in the business. I had one of my peers, we were talking. He's like, Justin, you're doing a ton of stuff. You're talking at all these conferences. Like, Justin, what's the end game, man? I said, I'm gonna be the most successful professor in supply chain management in the world. Now, I may not get there, but if I have that mindset internally, I'm gonna be doing pretty darn good, right? Now, I was in that position where I was teaching part-time in the adjunct roles for about 4 years before I went into higher education full time. This is my first semester of teaching higher education full time. One semester in, by February, I will speak at 12 international conferences. Most professors don't do that in their career. I mean, COVID had a good. That's one of the positive outcomes to COVID, where I can just hop on a call just like this and hop off. I got a call at 9 o'clock. I got a conference at 9 o'clock tonight. I had a conference at 4:15 last week. I did my panel discussion, turned my computer off, went right back to sleep. So that again, that's the benefits to COVID. But going back to your question, if you want to get into consulting, if you want to get into coaching, do what you're passionate about. If you're doing it for the money, it's not going to work out. It's not going to work out. Your clients are going to see through it. The clients will see that's what you're in it for. But if you're in it, the passion is going to show through. And you have to have the mindset where you want to give back. You want to pay it forward. You want to be that servant leader. And starting out, you're going to be doing a lot of talks for free, right? But you know what? The money will come. The money will come. Trust me. But you have to have that mindset to give back, and you have to have that mindset that this is what I'm passionate about. I'm not getting paid. I'm not getting paid to work. I'm getting paid to do my hobby right now, and I'm loving every minute of it.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And that's something I think that people, they hear it and it sounds like something that sounds great for, an Instagram post or a postcard or a Hallmark card. And yet in the last 25 plus years that I've listened to different people, same thing. Look, if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to want to do the work to become great at it. It's that simple. And then therefore you won't end up being great, but you add something to it. And that's the part. There's two pieces. One, and I do think this is a good part. So maybe pride's not the right word, but I guess it's one of the meanings of pride, of you taking pride in, yes, I want to be the best. Not in a cutthroat sense, not in a way of like, look, if my competition knows more, then great, I want to learn from them and be better, because it's the topic. And I try to explain this to people when people ask me, what do you see in the difference? Why do some people enjoy sports and some don't? So I coach kids. I played semi-professional beach volleyball, and I've enjoyed the process. So I maybe could have gone farther, but I have fun with it. I still play on Fridays. And there's always been, in my experience, at least two generic categories of people. There's the person that loves the game. And if you have a high level game as an athlete and they lose, but they played well and everybody played well, genuinely, they enjoyed the game. Like, we got to play this high level of basketball or volleyball or whatever it is. And of course they want to win. That doesn't go away. I mean, if you're an athlete, you want to win. But then there's the person that it's all about the win. And if the win doesn't come, it doesn't matter how awesome, if they did things they've never done before. It's literally, ultimately, did I have more points than the other person? Even if I played horribly, even if sometimes even worse if they cheated, but let's even take the cheating part out. Let's assume they're still ethical, but they're not enjoying it. And that, to me, is your point about the money only. If it's just for the result, you're just missing out. Maybe find a different topic, because if anything's been proven, in the last 5 to 10 years is you can make money at just about anything, because now that the world markets are all connected, if you're the best at whatever it is, then you can do that. Awesome. Thank you so much. There's so many things. I know, again, when you had reached out to me to be on the podcast, I even thought, gosh, this guy knows a lot. I don't know if I'm going to be able to not so much make it simple enough for the audience. Like, I don't understand what even ask this guy. And it's funny because people get, intimidated by simple words like Agile. And dude, and I've got a master's and a bachelor's, but this is what happens to us when we're sometimes as small business owners and entrepreneurs, like, well, no, I have to know everything. No, you don't. But I love what you're doing. I love your willingness to serve. I love your willingness to do these conferences, to give, to do what you're sharing as your hobby. Now, anything else you'd leave people with as far as advice for those, again, who are trying to just navigate themselves and their journey? And then also, where can people find out more about you?
I would say the biggest thing is, whenever you're trying to navigate your journey, don't do it for the money, but do it for your legacy. My legacy is sitting here fussing right now, my baby. But but I was speaking to another peer, and he said that, so he's a foster parent, and he said that I have that legacy mindset. I said, man, that is brilliant. He said, that's what it's all about. He said, and this is what I said to tell my students. I say that nobody's gonna say, man, Justin, a little money. They're gonna say, sorry, you gotta cut that out. but people are gonna say, man, Justin impacted a lot of people in the world, right? And that's my goal right now. And my goal is, like I said, my goal is to change the world. And again, you may not have a deep impact in changing the world, but if you hit a good 100 people, hey, I done my job at the end of the day. If you want to get in contact with me, I can be contacted via email at jlg566, Justin Lee Goldston 566 at PSU, Penn State University.edu. I can also be contacted on LinkedIn. I hope that you all reach out to me on LinkedIn, because I'm on there often. I share a lot of great information in the areas of supply chain management, in terms of Agile, in terms of Lean, and I'm always collaborating with a number of startups in a number of industries. So please connect with me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your message, and definitely your perspective. When people say they want to change the world, and I've done this before, you write a big number on a whiteboard and say, well, if I hit this number, it's like, no, dude, if you hit 100 people, if you hit 10 people, if you hit 5 people, and you make a huge impact. So thanks for the reminder on that. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. And to those of you all listening, as always, look forward to helping you help more people and make more money in less time, do what you do best, so you can better enjoy your family, your friends, and your life. Thanks for listening.